Hello and a warm welcome to this festive celebration video. So it's been almost a year since I really started to look at the metagame properly. And I've just finished and uploaded the 100th episode of Top Deck now. So first of all, thank you to everyone who submits their list to me. It's really awesome to have all of your contributions and to get your insight into each of these different decks and builds. Today I'm going to be taking you through the whole sort of workings of Top Deck, starting with how it all came about. So, to begin things, I was in my final year of university, having been producing pretty much ad hoc content for the entirety of the channel, which at that point was still called Zach Carnage. I noticed that although there was plenty of UK Yu-Gi-Oh content available, there wasn't really a centralized sort of hub of information, no place where you could get all kinds of deck lists together, with a sort of proven track record set up for it. More importantly, whenever you did get a deck list, there weren't really any extra insights attached. It was just a list that somebody would discuss, and they'd be like, oh, and this was the best card, and this was the worst card, and I changed this. And they didn't really give you much to go on, and you wouldn't have much understanding of how each individual card played its part within the deck. So mostly when you browse, you just come across decks that have either won a big regional, or maybe something higher, or you tend to find just decks that are random and stand out from the meta, so you don't have this sort of overall view of the meta as a whole. You won't be seeing majority of meta decks and fewer numbers of the other decks, which is kind of unfortunate really, because it means you miss out on a lot of variation. So I wanted to bring a kind of fully fledged meta-based platform with key information from the pilot, and that's essentially what Top Deck is. Beyond that, I tried to include some extra functionality to make life a little bit easier for you guys. A major part of that was that every single episode of Top Deck does include a dueling book link in the description, so as soon as you finish watching it you can get online, and within seconds you can be trying out that same deck for yourself. Top Deck has had some additional progression over the past year, thanks to suggestions like one from Callum Hinchcliffe suggesting that in his own video actually, that a deck list is never complete without a siding strategy. So you know what? Now every single episode of Top Deck does include a siding strategy from the pilot where possible. But enough about what Top Deck is, let's get on to how it's all made. So this is my basic setup. You can see I've got my MacBook here, which has all of the important software on it. So most important things are probably things like a QuickTime player, which is used to record the screen and also record audio when I have interviewers on. For video editing, I use HitFilm Express at the moment, which is pretty intuitive and has a lot of decent functionality available for it, so it's not too bad. In terms of thumbnails, I'm using GIMP, and I used to use Paint.net when I was on my old laptop, but they both do basically the same kind of stuff, to be honest. There's also Miro Video Converter, which I will explain in a little bit. So as well as having my MacBook, I've got my rather old iPod here, which is hooked up to a lavalier mic, which is what I'm currently using to record audio. So I used to be using just my old phone microphone to do all of my audio recording, but I switched up to this now. It makes it a little bit easier. I can have my hands free, and I don't. Earlier, my phone was just sort of sat on top of a deck box, a double deck box, and that was how I was recording all of the audio for myself. So I figured I should switch to a setup which is a little bit less hands-on, a little bit makeshift. But that's it in terms of sort of the physical setup. So the process of actually creating a Top Deck episode breaks out into a few fairly simple looking steps on the face of them. So first off, I need to get the deck list. There are lots of ways that I get lists these days. Some of them get sent in to me on Facebook, some of them get emailed in. I've recorded a few episodes in person actually, for when I have the time to go to events. And sometimes I just hop on to the competitive TCG group, which I'll just bring up now, which I think was started by Nadir or another group. On here is basically where every now and again there's a fair amount of information about events, and sometimes I hop in and just ask for deck lists, basically ask for who topped an event, and then try and get in touch with those people. But the most important thing is that all of these people are willing to contribute, and they're just happy to give up some of their time and some of their information so that I can share the content with you guys. So the preparatory phase involves identifying a few key questions about the list, how it maybe differs from a list that we've seen before, And after that, it really depends on whether the contributor wants to have an interview or if they want to just write responses to the questions. So here's one of the lists that I'm actually looking at the moment that has been sent in by Lewis. This is actually the 100th list that I'll be working on. Very similar to one of his old lists, but we'll get into more detail on that in the actual episode of Top Deck. So at the moment I don't really have an awful lot of time available for the interviews so much as I used to have before, because a typical interview could last maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. And in that case, I can't really justify putting all of that into a video, because I know you prefer something a little bit quicker, something that you can get through fairly quickly, to be honest. So it's not like a half-hour video is going to have to be taken as it is. I'll have to stitch everything together and then cut it down into lots of segments and then put it back together in a format that's fairly easy to consume, should we say. So that's not super easy to do at the moment, given that I'm working full-time, so I need some time in the evenings in order to relax as well as build up these Top Deck episodes. So at the moment I'm focusing more on the sort of sending questions to people directly, and there's this other sort of semi-interview process where I send the questions and get the person to send back recordings of themselves talking, because then you get a real feel for what they're focusing on within their questions at least, which is quite nice as well. Also in the preparatory phase we have this Google Sheets setup. So this is where the citing strategy comes in. I send out something that looks very similar to this to every person who contributes, and they can take these meta decks, fill in what they think are the most important decks that they've cited for, and then just put in what they've put in and take out for going first and second. Probably the most important thing here is actually taking out, because most deck lists you'll see, they won't include any information about what comes out of the deck. So it's really hard to gauge what's unimportant for a deck unless you've actually played it for a long time. Whereas having these sort of citing strategy Google Sheets makes it much easier to understand what's key for a deck and what needs to be kept in. And it gives you a sense of what these players have been building to face against when they've actually assembled this list. As well as the citing strategy, I also assemble a Word document for each of them. So this is the one from Connor's second place list from Newcastle under Lyme. And essentially I'll plug in all of the rounds that I've been submitted, as well as information about all of the rounds, maybe some questions. So like here you can see I've asked him some questions on Facebook and has some responses, so it's that kind of thing. All goes into this Word document, and the point of that is that I then don't have to like hop into Facebook and back off again and hop into one other thing. It just makes it a little bit easier to digest. So all of this information comes in, and from there I can work on actually building the video. So here's the latest one that I'm working on here. So in terms of recording, after I've got all of the bits and pieces together, I hook up the lav mic to my iPod, get the MacBook set up, and I try to record when it's fairly quiet in the house, but if you watch all of the Top Decks you'll see that that is not always totally possible. Step 4 is editing. So before I can actually stitch everything together, there are a few additional steps. HitFilm isn't really very happy about dealing with .mov files, which is what the QuickTime Player exports. So I have to export the screen footage at 1080p and then use Miro Video Converter, which is this fun thing here. See if it'll bring up. Here we go. So you can plug in some video files here, and from there you can edit them and bring them into MP4 files, which is the type that we need in order to work with HitFilm. And then all of the audio gets uploaded to the Google Drive, and then from the Google Drive downloaded onto the MacBook. It's just the simplest way that I currently have in order to get the information onto the MacBook. And then once all of that is actually together, I can start doing the editing. So what I'll do is I'll pull up HitFilm, we'll see if it'll load. And try and get an example of one that I've edited previously. But the editing process is the kind of thing that takes a little while, because first of all the audio needs to be connected to the videos, because they're not actually going in and being recorded at the same time, they're being recorded by different things. So the audio is recorded on the iPod, video is recorded on the MacBook, so they need to be hooked up. All of the additional features like the photos that go in, screenshots, so you can see here actually, these are all screenshots of the rounds and of the citing strategy segments, which just get plugged in. It's just the easiest way to get all of that information into the HitFilm file, so that it can be exported from there. So this is just going to have a little while loading. It does take a little while to get going. But yeah, so QuickTime, Miro, and then Hit Film are the sort of 3 stages in which the videos are being processed, I guess. Let's see if we can open up a recent one. So we have Top Deck 99 here. And Hit Film likes to do this thing where it tells you to install a series of updates, etc., but they're not totally necessary. It's good to keep it up to date, but there are quite a few additional things that it tries to give you that aren't entirely necessary. Okay, so here we have an example of a Hit Film file. So we have the intro section, which I never touch really, and then you can see we've got the video file here, which is the MP4 version, which has been plugged in and adjusted the size accordingly, and then the audio, which also the audio after it's lined up with the, so I have to line up sideways or horizontally, I guess, with the video feed. I then need to adjust the levels so that it fits in with the intro, etc. And you can see we just got these pictures which come into the video at different points. I'm just going to turn off audio for that. And then these are all the screenshots. So these need to be lined up with the audio, because I'll be just talking about them in the audio, and then I need to plug it in and then have it run for as long as I'm talking about that section of that bit. So that's all the details of this sort of editing side of it, and then obviously it closes out with the typical picture Perry and the outro there. But yeah, and all of this audio that I'm using comes from the YouTube audio library. Let's see if I can pull that up as well. So YouTube actually has an inbuilt audio library of music that you can use for your videos, which is totally copyright free. So you just pick the correct attribution and the correct license, and then you're good to go. It also has a host of sound effects that you can use as well, so it's a really good system for using those two things together. The exporting process, so after you've done all of the, where did I put it, the editing on this kind of thing, you just go ahead and export it. So let's just see if we were to do this one now and export it, how long it thinks it's going to take. So you can see it has this nice preview here, and it has a time-elapsed record, and it should be able to estimate how long it's going to take to export this video. I mean, the typical export time is about an hour, to be honest. Sometimes it goes a little bit lower, but it does obviously depend on the length of the video, how complicated it's going to be. I don't think it's going to come up with a remaining. But that is it. So the process is not super complicated. It's just got a lot of little additional steps that make it a little bit more tricky. So it's probably about an hour to an hour and a half in order to complete this for any single video. But that's without a full interview. In order to have the full interview on top, it will take a little bit longer. That's just because there's so many steps involved. So you can see it's going to take another 40 minutes or something in order to get this thing going. So yeah, it does take a little while in order to get each of these guys done. But there are a fair amount of features that help out with things, and hopefully combining all of this together really helps you guys as well. I think really having the interview is a nice touch, but it's not always possible just because of that additional time. The community aspect of Top Deck is really probably the best part of it, because you have so many people contributing to this, and meeting people at events is also really, really cool. As far as YouTube goes, the updated features are quite nice for that kind of interaction too. Some of you will have seen that the last 2 polls that I've actually put up on the channel, one of them was asking, just a post asking for ideas on how to celebrate the 100 episodes of Top Deck. I've decided to go with this. There were some other good suggestions, things like the top 10 Top Decks and bloopers and stuff, but unfortunately I don't keep bloopers because there are just so many video files going into this that I don't have room to save them all. So I thought I'd give you guys a sort of closer look at what goes on in making each of these instead. Moving forward with the channel, Top Deck will remain pretty much the same, just being a key part of the channel, and I'm really looking forward to this sort of journey of the episodes from 101 up to episode 200. Beyond that, I'll do the occasional thought piece, which will pretty much always be statistics driven, and I've got something in the mix at the moment actually that I want to share with you guys fairly soon too, so I'll see if I can find some more time to get those sorted out and upload them as well. As always, thanks for watching this video. Please do share the video if you think that anyone else might be interested in watching it. Drop me a like if you enjoy the video too. Subscribe to see more from the channel and stay on top of the leading UK deck lists. And I'll see you guys in the next one.